Well, let me welcome everybody to the Riverside Municipal Museum. My name is Ted Wegland, and I'm part of the organizing team for the History Day competition here this weekend. And I also happen to be longtime friends with our guest speaker today, Walt Ehlers. And we wanted to bring Walt in because History Day is an important day to recognize not only important events in history, but important people in history. And you know, some of the young kids here in the audience and some of the older people will understand that the word hero is sort of so ubiquitous now that it's almost lost its meaning. And yet we have a gentleman here today who really is a true American hero. And so I'll just give you a little background on Walt. Walt will turn 91 years old in about a week. Walt served in World War II. He was a part of 3 different D-Day invasions. By the time he was 24, he had participated in 3 D-Day invasions in North Africa, and Sicily, and then Omaha Beach on D-Day. And Walt was supposed to be a part of the second wave going in on the beach the morning of June 6, 1944. But the casualties were so great with the first wave that they called Walt's group and they moved his group up to hit the beach right after the first wave. So he's called it the 1.5 wave. Yeah, they sort of joined the first wave. And so he hit the beach the morning of June 6, 1944. He hit it also with his brother at the same time, his older brother, Roland. And he has another older brother, Klaus, who's 94 now. And he has 3 sisters who are all in their 80s and live back east. But he hit the beach, Omaha Beach, that morning, and was able to take his boys off the beach and up the cliffs through the pillboxes into the hedgerow country without losing a single man.
Wow.
And then 2 or 3 days after the invasion, I think it was on the 8th and 9th of June in Gauville, France, he participated in some activities against the Germans that ultimately resulted in his receiving the Medal of Honor, which of course is the highest award given in the United States for military valor. Walt is the only living recipient of the Medal of Honor, commonly referred to as a Congressional Medal of Honor, the only living recipient of the Medal of Honor who stormed Omaha Beach on D-Day. And so he really is a living legend, and he is about the most decent and honest and humble man I have met in my entire life. So it is possible to be a hero and be a humble man. And so Walt is here to talk a little bit about his experience in World War II, share that with you, and then we'd be happy to take any questions from you. But I should add, I neglected to say that his older brother Roland, who stormed the beach with him on D-Day, lost his life on the beach. And they were very, very close, and he revered his older brother, but I know that's something he will never forget. So anyway, here is a friend of our communities and a friend of our nation's. This is Walt Ehlers, Medal of Honor recipient.
It's good to see all of you here, and it's good to be here. I'm a very lucky person to be here, actually, because I saw so many people die in the war during World War II, and I never expected to come back to be 91 years old in my life. I might tell you why I'm probably still here. Number one is in 1940, when I joined the military service, I had to have my mother's signature, and so I was sent home from Fort Riley, Kansas, to get her signature, and my dad's. And my dad, am I talking close enough now? And my dad said, well, he would sign But my mother said, well, son, she looked me straight in the eye, and she had tears in her eyes. And she said, I'll only sign if you promise to be a Christian soldier. And I said, well, I'll do my best. And, you know, I never forgot that. And I knew that we were fighting for God and country. And so I figured that I had to justify why I was out, some people say killing people, but I wasn't killing people, I was only killing the enemy. And I wasn't trained to kill people, I was trained to kill the enemy. And so most all of us guys that landed that day were thinking about killing the enemy, not getting killed. And also we were fighting to live. And they ask you if you're scared. Well, sure you're scared, but if you weren't scared, you probably wouldn't have lived, because you get yourself killed real fast. So anyway, that's the way I lived my life throughout the military career. And I never smoked and I never drank. And I knew I would better not go around carousing around, because my mother wouldn't have approved of it. And I'm sure God wouldn't have either if I'd have done some of the things I saw some of my counterparts do. So anyway, that's the way I lived my life through the military service. And then I was in a lot of combat. I went through the African campaign, where they had 2 or 3 campaigns there, and then had a campaign in Sicily, and then we had 5 campaigns after we landed in Normandy. Altogether I had 8 campaigns and 3 invasions. The Normandy invasion was the saddest day of my life, because that was the day that my brother got killed. But I wasn't informed of his being killed on the beach until July the 14th in 1944. That was the first confirmation I got that he was killed in action. Before, they told me he was missing in action. And I didn't figure he'd be missing in action, because it had to be worse than missing in action for him, because he was a very dedicated soldier. And he was a great soldier. He was my best friend. And but I had a lot of best friends in the service that got killed also. And I had a brother, by the way, Klaus. He fought in the Pacific. He carried a BAR for 3 years, and he got through the Pacific without getting any serious wound or anything like that. And he's now still living. He's 93. But he went through 3 years of combat with a BAR. And that's a very dangerous job, because that's the one the enemy wants to get first if they can. And but he survived it. But he has a horrible war story to tell you about what the Japanese did in the Philippines and so forth. And he fought in the Pacific, in the Philippines. He saw MacArthur land. My important people that I saw is in Casablanca, Africa, and that's in French Morocco. Actually, when we were on the boat going over, they gave us French translation books, and we didn't know we were going to France, but we figured we were going to France because we had French translation books. We didn't know there was a place in Africa that spoke French. In other words, you learn a lot when you go on these kind of tours. When we got to French, even some of the Arabs there spoke French, but they weren't speaking English yet. And so that's when I landed. There were a few Arabs that spoke French, and they were French policemen. So I went with them and went through Cosmos and things like that, and on patrols and so forth. And the Casablanca conference we had there, President Roosevelt was there, and that's when I first met the big hero of my life, was President Roosevelt. And I was a Democrat because everybody was a Democrat when President Roosevelt was a president. It just seemed like, anyway. And so I was just doing the normal thing. And of course, I'm over there doing the normal thing. I was just doing my job. And so I saw Roosevelt and Churchill and de Gaulle. In fact, I went to de Gaulle's villa and got to go through his villa, and that was an interesting trip because there was a guard that was helping guard villas, de Gaulle's villa. And so the gal there that was in charge, she took me and showed me the inside. Interesting stuff, you know. And then we went to Sicily, and we landed off, you know, in Higgins boats. You know, Higgins boats, so everybody thinks of the Higgins boat because the D-Day Museum has a Higgins boat with a ramp down the front. Well, they were using them in the Pacific before they did in World War II in Europe, but we had Higgins boats when we landed in Omaha Beach. And so I actually was on an LST, supposed to be in the second wave, but the first wave got pinned down. I was in the 18th Infantry Regiment of the 1st Infantry Division, by the way. That was caused by Roosevelt because when we were in Africa, I landed with the 3rd Infantry Division, and I was in the 3rd Infantry Division and an honor guard for the Casablanca Conference. And when he's going down the street, he says, these will make mighty good replacements for the 1st Infantry Division. So that's how I got in the 1st, and then I was shipped up to North Africa, and I joined the 1st and fought at El Guitar, and it was the biggest battle I had. The next battle was big battles when we went into Sicily. We had to fight our way across the middle of Sicily. Patton went around to the left. The English went around to the right. We had the English on our right side, and we were going in, but we were fighting up through Troyan or someplace like that. And then my brother got wounded the first time in Sicily. He got wounded by screaming Mimi mortars, and they have mortars packed on a half track, and they go in a circle and they fire off in a circle the rounds that are in them. And so they get about 8 rounds in the air at one time, and they come in like a barrage. Well, we got caught in one of those barrages, and my brother got covered up with shrapnel debris and stuff like that was laying around. And so I had to help uncover him, and he had multiple shrapnel wounds in his back and multiple shell fragment wounds in his back. So he had to be transferred back to the field hospital, and then they sent him back to Africa for his treatment. And so that was the last day I saw him in combat. That was in Africa. Then we went to England from there, and my brother got well enough to rejoin us in England, and we trained some more, and we were in Dorchester, England. I don't know if anybody knows where that is, but it was a nice little town, beautiful. We had a good time there and all that stuff, but didn't last too long. And he called me into the office one day, and my brother, and they said, because of the Sullivan brother incident in the Pacific where they had lost 5 brothers in one group, they said, we have to separate you. General Marshal's orders. And so we were separated, but I was the one that was transferred out of the company. I was sent to Company L, which is a sister company. So we were still close together, but of course I have all new men, and I had to train these new men that I had that landed with me on D-Day. Used to be entertainers. One was an accordion player, one was a guitar player, one was a singer, country music that is. And we had another guy that played the violin. And so we had all these, but they never wanted to be messed with. They just wore their old clothes, and they went out and they were entertaining the troops in England and going to the hospitals, things like this. But they told us we had to pass the inspection, and I told my squad that they hadn't had anybody order them around like I did. And And I said, well, you're going to have to pass inspection before you can go any further with your entertainment. And one of the guys challenged me. He said, Sergeant, he says, I'll fight you for your demand that I pass inspection. And I said, no, I'm not a fighting man. I'm just a leader here. And I said, you either do what I tell you to, and or suffer the consequences. Well, I didn't know what the consequences were going to be because he wanted to fight me, and I said, I don't box. So I didn't. I said, but you know, if you're interested in wrestling, I'll wrestle you. And he said, oh, well, he says, that's fine. He says, he'll wrestle me. So here we start to go at it, and I had him pinned down on his bunk and nothing flat, and had his arm over the iron rail, and I said, I'm going to break your arm if you don't say uncle. And he did say uncle, but they never got to box me, and thank goodness, because I wasn't a boxer. I could wrestle. Yeah. So anyway, that's what was going on, and I got a lot of respect from the squad after that. And so when I landed in England, when I said, you can't stay on this beach, they knew that I meant it, because they wanted to dig in right on the beach, and I said, you can't do that, you'll be dead like the rest of the guys laying around here. It was a mess when we went in. It was unbelievable. The Germans had full military troops up in their trenches, and the machine guns were mounted and so forth. And there's a guy sitting on top of a pillbox with a machine gun, and he was firing at the troops coming in. I got to meet that guy later, and he told me he was crying because he was killing so many Americans. He was just a regular German soldier. He wasn't a Nazi or he wasn't an SS man. He was just a regular German soldier doing his job, and I respect him for that. But you know, when I got my Medal of Honor, I was only doing my job, what I was trained to do. And by the way, part of my action after on June the 10th, it was the last day of the action, and we were going up along a hedgerow, and we got fired upon from 3 sides, and company commander ordered us to withdraw, and I knew, well, we couldn't withdraw, because if we turned our backs on them, they'd shoot us all in the back. So what I did, I went out on a mound there. There was a little mound there on the other side. There was a place, an insulage mound where they stored insulage for the cattle in the wintertime, you know, and they have it all covered up with dirt and so forth. So I went out there, and I was firing in a semicircle, and my BAR man came up with me, and he was firing to the right, and I was firing to the left. And we got all of our troops back into the other side. One man got killed up in the hedgerow, the first scout did. And he was the accordion player. But anyway, we turned, when we saw that our troops were all back, then we turned to go, and sure enough, just exactly what I thought would happen. He got shot, you know, from the Germans, and he got shot in the right leg and the right arm, and he was down on the field. And I was already going ahead of him, and I was about to go through a gate there, but I was held up because I saw Germans putting in a machine gun down in the corner, so I figured, well, they were only about 100 yards from me, so I was shooting at them, and I know I was hitting them, but then I got hit in the back, and it spun me around, and that took my attention off of them, but I fell down, and as I was going down, I shot a German that was in the hedgerow, and then I saw my VAR man laying on the field, so I went up and got him, and I couldn't carry his rifle at the time, so I just picked him up and got his arm, his left arm around my shoulder. His right arm was disabled, and his right leg was, he couldn't walk on it. And so I hauled him back and got him taken care of. And then I saw my VR man laying on the ground, so I went back and I got him. I'm losing my mind. I got him back. But anyway, then I went back. When I turned him over to the medics, I went back and got the rifle. Somebody said, well, what were you thinking when you went back to get that rifle? I said, well, I wasn't thinking. If I'd have been thinking, I wouldn't have done it. I was just doing my job. I automatically did that. So anyway, And that was my explanation for going after a useless rifle, baby. But it wasn't useless. It became very handy later on. Anyway, that's what happened in my action for the Medal of Honor. There's a lot more, but you can ask questions.
Okay, what I'd like to, can I use your mic just for a second, Walt? I'm going to bring this over here. I just want to, yeah, I had mentioned he's a humble, modest man, which clearly you can tell he is. And when he says that he was going to fight, or wrestle, this guy over this issue, that he's not a fighting man, it's almost hard to believe given, what he did. But I walked out for a few minutes, and I'm not sure exactly what he said about, storming the beach and his actions for the Medal of Honor that caused him to receive the Medal of Honor. And I thought I would just read it to you. Is that all right, Walt?
Yeah, if you want.
If you haven't read his citation, okay, here's a man who doesn't like fighting, who I can tell you is one of the most gentle human beings I've ever met in my life. So here is his citation. Staff Sergeant Ehlers' official Medal of Honor citation reads, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty on 9-10 June 1944 near Gauville, France. Staff Sergeant Ehlers, always acting as the spearhead of the attack, repeatedly led his men against heavily defended enemy strong points, exposing himself to deadly hostile fire whenever the situation required heroic and courageous leadership. Without waiting for an order, Staff Sergeant Ehlers, far ahead of his men, led his squad against a strongly defended enemy strong point, personally killing 4 of an enemy patrol who attacked him en route. Then, crawling forward under withering machine gun fire, he pounced upon the gun crew and put it out of action. Turning his attention to 2 mortars protected by the crossfire of 2 machine guns, Staff Sergeant Ehlers led his men through this hail of bullets to kill or put to flight the enemy of the mortar section, killing 3 men himself. After mopping up the mortar positions, he again advanced on a machine gun, his progress effectively covered by his squad. When he was almost on top of the gun, he leaped to his feet, and although greatly outnumbered, he knocked out the position single-handedly. The next day, having advanced deep into enemy territory, the platoon of which Staff Sergeant Ehlers was a member, finding itself in an untenable position as the enemy brought increased mortar, machine gun, and small arms fire to bear on it, was ordered to withdraw. Staff Sergeant Ehlers, after his squad had covered the withdrawal of the remainder of the platoon, stood up and by continuous fire at the semicircle of enemy placements, diverted the bulk of the heavy hostile fire on himself, thus permitting the members of his own squad to withdraw. At this point, though wounded himself, he carried his wounded automatic rifleman to safety and then returned fearlessly over the shell-swept field to retrieve the automatic rifle which he was unable to carry previously. After having his wound treated, he refused to be evacuated and returned to lead his squad. This intrepid leadership, indomitable courage, and fearless aggressiveness displayed by Staff Sergeant Ehlers in the face of overwhelming enemy forces serve as an inspiration to others. So, as you can see, he is a... Okay, enough of me introducing Walt. Please, any questions you have of Walt, please feel free to ask. Yes?
2 questions. First, everybody always says, oh, the D-Day invasion, that was a really great, bold plan. I disagree. If you were in charge, how would you have done the D-Day invasion?
Did you hear that all right?
I probably wouldn't have done any different than our leaders. Oh, excuse me. I probably wouldn't have done any different than my leaders did, because after all, none of us had been in a position like that before. You know, this was a big operation, and there was a lot of leaders there. But the point was that I have tunnel vision. I only know what I see. And I was leading my own squad, and I had a mission to go to, I was supposed to go to Ehlers and do a reconnaissance patrol, but that didn't happen that way. I had to fight my way off of the beach by having a barbed wire fence blown before we could go through it and so forth like this, and then I led them up through the beach. We led them through a lot of firefights and things like that. And I don't see how anybody could do anything but their own particular job as they were going, because nobody knew exactly what was that. Nobody knew that the beach wasn't going to be bombed, for instance. That's the number one thing. But then it didn't happen. Because there were a lot of people involved in it, and that was the Air Force fault or not fault. It was the weather spot, because they couldn't see the beach and they didn't want to bomb the guys that were on the beach. So they actually dropped their bombs about 2 miles inland. They missed the beach entirely. But so all the gun emplacements were intact when we made the landing. And like I say, I don't know if I'd have done it any different either, because we wouldn't know that was going to happen until we got there.
Second question. As you talk with other Medal of Honor recipients, would you say that there is one single thing that all Medal of Honor recipients have in common?
You got that question?
Well, the question, I don't know it exactly. I didn't hear it entirely.
Here. The question is, in your experience with the other Medal of Honor recipients, is there one characteristic or one trait that all Medal of Honor recipients seem to have?
Oh, the one trait they all seem to have is fighting to cover their men, fighting to win the war. And the number one trait was that if they saw a man in problem, they didn't think about themselves. They were thinking about the other person to save his life, or to save their squad's life, or something like that. They were all actually doing the same thing. A guy who throws himself on a grenade, he'll probably save about 8 men's lives, because about that time when a grenade it doesn't come in there accidentally. It comes in there with a purpose to kill as many people as they can with it. And so usually there are more people than just yourself around it. And so if you throw yourself on it, that means you are trying to protect the other people's lives. And so they did get a Medal of Honor. And so a lot of people have gotten them, and I know about 3 or 4 of us are still living that got the Medal of Honor by throwing themselves on a grenade. But it was a miraculous incident that they even are living, because it destroyed the helmet, it destroyed their guts and things like that. Plus the fact they kept the shrapnel and stuff being in them instead of going around killing about 8 or 10 other men.
Questions? Yes.
I mean, after it's all said and done, and you went to war, what was the hardest thing to deal with after it was all done, emotionally or spiritually wise? After you guys all go home, you've experienced the death of your troops and your brother. What was the hardest thing to deal with, and how did you deal with it?
The question is, when the war was over and you came back to the United States, what was the hardest part about the war being over and you coming back and getting back involved in civil society?
Well, I didn't have a hard part about it, but actually, when I got the Medal of Honor, I read about it in the Stars and Stripes. And so I was in a hospital in Paris recovering from wounds, and I hadn't gotten the Medal of Honor, and I didn't know I was getting it, but I read about it in the Stars and Stripes. I was on a train going back to from Paris to my outfit. When I got to on the train, I was reading the Stars and Stripes, and a guy on the plane knew my brother and I, and so he thought it was my brother I was reading about too, because he knew I was reading. He said, "Hey, I read where your brother got the Medal of Honor." I said, "Yeah, I'm reading it too." But I didn't tell him it was me he was reading about, because I hadn't gotten it. And I didn't even know I was getting it until I read that. And so when I got back to the outfit, I was walking up to the front, and the colonel called me by my name. I didn't know the colonel. I hadn't seen him before you. And he said, "Sergeant Ehlers, what are you doing here?" I said, "Well, sir, I'm reporting back to duty." He says, "Well, you're supposed to be back in the States getting the Medal of Honor from the President." I said, "Yes, sir, I read about it in the Stars and Stripes." So that's how I found out about it. And then when I got back, why they took me up, and I was introduced to General Hubner, who was then the 1st Division commander, and he took me to a press conference, and when we had the press conference, they were asking me all stupid questions about how many people do you kill, and do you hate the Germans and all this. I told them I don't hate anybody. And then, so anyway, I deflected most of the questions and all this stuff, and when it was over, and when the general was walking me out, and he said, "Sergeant," he says, "you handled the press better than anybody ever had up here." I said, "Well, wow." And he says, "I'm going to promote you to a 2nd lieutenant." I said, "I don't think I qualify." He said, "You qualify." I said, "Yes, sir." I wasn't going to dispute him. And so I got promoted to a 2nd lieutenant. You see, that's the reason everybody says, "Sergeant Ehlers," when you got the Medal of Honor. Actually, they're supposed to be saying, Lieutenant Ehlers, then Sergeant Ehlers, how did you feel about it or something, but they don't do that. They always say Sergeant because I got a Medal of Honor during the time while I was an enlisted man, but I didn't get it until I was a 2nd lieutenant. So I really got it when I was a 2nd lieutenant.
I think one difference, I've known Walt for many years, and you know, the difference, you know, from the boys coming back from World War II versus coming back from Vietnam, you know, they couldn't be, you know, more different experiences. So I think the United States welcoming the boys back in World War II was a lot different.
But I wanted to tell you, so they sent me home for 30 days. I didn't have the story quite ended. They sent me home for 30 days. And I did go home for 30 days, and I had orders to report back, which I did. And after 30 days, during the Battle of the Bulge, which I missed most of, which I was thankful for that, because it's colder than heck out there. That's a better word for that. But anyway, I went back, and actually I got wounded again after I got back. I got in April 1945, got wounded in the right leg, and I still have a bullet in my right leg. But I didn't have, when I got home from World War II though, the medal didn't mean anything at that time. They had quite a few medals, and they weren't, you know, concentrating any on a guy that hadn't been heard from very much as me. And I just went back and joined my family and went home, started working on the farm again. But you know, I got tired, and I thought there were better places to go, and so I started to work for the Veterans Administration in 1946, but I got reattacked of malaria that I'd gotten in Sicily, and so the doctor came to me. He said I had scarlatina, and I said I don't think so, but anyway. He quarantined me for 3 weeks, and so I stayed home for 3 weeks, and I decided to quit the VA and go to school. So I went down to the college, and I enrolled at Kansas State University after passing all the tests and everything. And I did it the first week in school. I did an essay, and I got a B+ on it. I thought, this is fantastic. I only worked 15 minutes on it. So I did another essay, another one for the next time, and I got a big fat F on it, and I don't think the teacher even saw it. I think some student probably put the F on it and gave it back to her or something. But anyway, I tried to see the teacher. We had 150 students in the class. It was summertime, and it was hot. And I said, I've had enough of this college. They don't know any more than I do. So a friend of mine was with me, and we decided to go across the United States. We came back home, and I sold my P-38, and everybody thinks I had a P-38 airplane, but I didn't. I had a P-38 revolver. It was a German revolver. And so then I came out to California, and first place I got to was San Francisco, and then put on a train, sent down to Presidio, Monterey. Fantastic place to serve. It was for my military induction, and then I enlisted to go into the 17th Infantry Regiment, 7th Division, and they were at Fort Ord. So I finally got to Fort Ord and went, and then Fort Ord didn't become a mechanized division like it was supposed to. So they said we're going to train selective service men coming in, and they want all the regular Army men to be transferred to the 3rd Infantry Division. Another place I went was the 30th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Division in Presidio, San Francisco. What a beautiful place that was. The food was fantastic. We got rations from from our tickets that we spent at the PXs, and so the sergeants there, they fixed up our breakfasts and everything. We had fantastic. We had ham and eggs for breakfast and cereals on the table and all that kind of stuff. I thought I died and went to heaven. That didn't last long. We were sent up to Fort Lewis, Washington. That's where we started all of our infantry training, and that was the 3rd Division. And that's what we end up in, going into Africa. And then, like I told you before, I was at the Honor Guard at Casablanca Conference, and the President Roosevelt got us all transferred to the 1st Infantry Division, and that's where I joined the 1st. So, and by the time I came home, all the glory of my stint was forgotten about, and I just went on about my business. I went to work. I was working for the VA for 16 years out here, and I was in Los Angeles. And I worked for 16 years, and I got a telephone call from the White House, and they told me, they said on this thing, they said the White House calling Walter Ehlers. So they usually don't have the broadcast system on, but this time it went all over the hospital, and that's the first time they knew I had the Medal of Honor. That's how long I'd been working for there before anybody paid any attention. And it isn't until recently, probably the last 20 years, that we became quite well recognized, because we started a program of talking to the schools, and I've been talking to schools ever since I retired in 1980. And I've been retired since 1980 after 34 years of government service. So I did go back to work for the VA because they had a very good retirement program. That's how I spent my life. Yes.
How do you feel about the war in Afghanistan?
Sir?
How do you feel about the war in Afghanistan and Iraq?
How do you feel about the war in Afghanistan and Iraq?
I feel sorry that we have to even go there, but on the other hand, our nation has served a lot of countries in some odd ways, and that's one of the odd ways. We're trying to get them freedom. And as you know, World War II freed 3 countries. They freed France, and they freed Germany, and they freed Italy, and they freed Japan. 4 countries. I'm losing my mind, you know. But anyway, these 3 of these countries are all democracies now. And well, actually 4 of them are all democracies now. And Russia, which actually we have helped gain freedom, we haven't got it fully corrected yet. But now there's other countries asking us for help. And a lot of people don't know that we have treaties, for instance, with Korea. We had a treaty in 1873. We were honoring that treaty in the 1870s sometime. And the Koreans have 4 Medal of Honor recipients. I mean, we have 4 Medal of Honor recipients from the Korean War at that time. And this time we've got about 70, so, you know, we're still fighting for freedom. And freedom is actually your religion. And our religion, of course, is Protestant. A lot of people's is Catholic, a lot of people's is Jewish. Doesn't make any difference what your religion is, just as if you believe in freedom, you've got to fight for it. And that's what we're doing, but we're also helping other countries. And so I feel sorry for these guys that have to go over there and fight in Afghanistan, and it seems like a useless place to life. But you know, there's people there, children, and they hadn't been to school for 10 years. And we now have kids going to school, all the kids are going to school. And they're going around carrying cell phones and things like that too, by the way, which helps the enemy a lot. But anyway, we have a problem, and that is communication, but we can't do anything about it because they got freedom and they can have them. And they do what they do over there in civilian uniforms. Nobody knows who they are, so they pull terror tricks. And they put out roadside bombs. Most of our people over there killed or injured by roadside bombs and things like that. It's not really a fighting force. It's a defending force. And they have to be out on the roads, but their vehicles keep running over road lines. And I don't know if you know that or not, but this is the hazards of being in the military service today. It's not only fighting, but it's protecting yourself and trying to miss those road bombs and all these things. And they do a lot of research, but they still get them in occasionally. And that's what most of the trouble's at. Yes.
Just a little closer. It's just hard. No, it's just hard for them to hear. There's another question.
Anybody else want a question?
Yeah.
Yes.
First, let me thank you for what you and the others did for us, because I know we wouldn't be able to enjoy the things that we have today if you guys hadn't gone out there and fought the way you did. And I think it's pretty amazing that you went through 3 invasions and got out alive. My question is, do you think that they'd be able to pull off as big an operation as they did in invading Normandy with all the communication things that they're out, cell phones, internet, etc.?
We would have never got there if they had cell phones in those days, because, you know, we had a lot of secrecy invasions in World War II, even in the islands and in Japan and things like this. If we'd had cell phones then, we probably would have never been able to make them, because everybody else in the world has them now.
Did you know that you guys were going to go into places like
That's
that?
what makes it so difficult. I don't know what my life would be like. I would go, I would be glad to go. In fact, I have a son in the service. He's now a lieutenant colonel.
Wow.
And he's been over to Djibouti, and that's a hellhole in Africa. It's a very, of course, Rwanda's right close, so he went to visit that when he was there, but it's a pretty tough place to go. And I feel sorry for him, and I feel sorry because he's got a wife and he's got 5 kids, you know, and they worry about him more than I do, I guess, but I worry all the time about him being out there. Anytime he goes, and he's subject to go again soon. So, I don't know.
Any other questions? Yes.
First of all, thank you for your service and thank you for coming out today.
Thank you.
We appreciate that. I'd like to change the tone of question just slightly. And if you can recall any funny incidents you had during your service?
I had a friend one time, this is not really a funny incident, but I'll tell you it anyway. First of all, you know, my mother promised me to be a Christian, so I tried to be one. And so when we were out there in Africa one time, I had this friend who went with me to church back in Fort Lewis, Washington. I talked him into it. And I said, well, why don't you go to church with me? He said, well, I'm an atheist, I don't go to church. I said, well, you ought to come and see what it's like. So we went to church, and when we came out, he said, I'm still an atheist. I told him, I said, you can be anything you want to be. So we were out there in Africa, and his name happened to be Pete. And he's out there, and the Germans were attacking us. They had tanks coming towards us, and we had to dig in on the hill. And it was a rocky hill. And he's out there, and he's going like this with his old trench shovel going up and down. He says, oh, God help me, oh, God help me. He sure got religion. But anyway, I asked him later when I had a chance to, I said, Pete, I said, when you were digging in out there on that hill, how come you were asking God to help you? He said, there was nobody else asked to help me. That is how important God is, even to our country. It is an important thing. But he got his religion quite quick. And I said, but that wasn't the only one. I've seen that happen before.
Any questions? Yes?
What were the circumstances that you got to meet the German soldier that had been shooting people on the beach?
I can't hear.
I might have been out
The
when,
machine gunner.
Machine gunner on Omaha
You
Beach.
said, you said you'd met the machine gunner. Under what circumstances did you meet the German machine gunner from?
I met the German machine gunner in 1960. I mean, 1960, the 60th anniversary in Normandy.
Okay.
That's when I met him. He was a survivor, sort of like I was.
to tell everybody real briefly about when you gave, Walt gave the speech at the 60th anniversary of the D-Day invasion. And it's really pretty incredible who he was. Well, tell him about giving the speech.
Who, what?
Tell him about giving the speech at the 60th anniversary of the invasion.
About the invasion,
Here, pull it just a little closer.
I admit, I did get almost to it. When I mentioned a while ago, it was the White House called my home, called me to work at the VA, and the president was calling and wanted me to go to Normandy with him. Now I might be getting this wrong. 60th anniversary. Who did I go with?
Maybe, I'm not sure if it's the 60th or the 50th, but it's when.
There was a
It was Clinton, wasn't it?
50th anniversary, 50th, you're right, 50th anniversary.
Yeah, it's Clinton.
You know, I have so many years in my life, I still have. On the 50th anniversary, Clinton was president then. And I was going to say, I didn't get there too early. Anyway, on the 50th anniversary, that was 94. And so the plane flew out and picked us up. And he had, it was the president's plane that picked me and my wife up. And Carlos Ogden, who is a Medal of Honor recipient from San Jose, he's now passed away, but he and his wife, and he picked us up and took us back to Washington, and we had a big conference there, and he had General Bradley there. And so he's sending a delegation to Europe to represent the president, and that's who was representing the president, because he was going to the Far East at that time with some of our troubles that's going on in the Far East right now. But anyway, we went over there, and so I was called on to give us, they asked, when the White House called me, they said, they even called me Sergeant then too, and they said, Sergeant Ehlers, you're giving a speech at the French liberation ceremonies on D-Day in 1994. I said, how come? I said, I thought that's the president's job. And the president said, well, they wanted a GI from the United States to give a talk on D-Day at the French liberation ceremonies. So they said, you have your speech prepared? I said, of course not. I wasn't knowing I was going to talk. And, so he said, well, can you get a speech? That was the president's speechwriter calling, you know. And I said, well, I guess I can. And because he knew that I was coming over with General Sullivan anyway, so they weren't going to cost him anything. Anyway, so I said I would, and I sat down to write a speech, and then I got my daughter to dress it up because she's a English teacher at the Cal State University, Fullerton. She's been there for 30 years now. But anyway, she dressed up a speech, got all the sentences working out. But anyway, and the speech went off fantastic, but I was talking to 17 heads of state. Now, they're a group that's sitting right out there in front of me like you guys are, and then there's 7,000 veterans over here and 7,000 veterans over there, and I had to get up out the 7,000 over here walked out. They didn't have and all I had was my speech in a loose paper, because we didn't have time to bind it or anything. And several things happened before, and it's kind of weird, but anyway, when I was giving my speech, I saw the Queen Elizabeth and Queen of France, King of France, and was I forget his name. Anyway, and all the generals were there. Actually, Senator Dole was sitting right behind me in the veterans stand, where I had to come out and walk over to the beach. They walk up on the beach and take a microphone out there, and a loose microphone just like this. And I have a speech, you know, that's a pretty hard job to do. And the wind is usually blowing down there on the beach. But anyway, I can tell you a funny incident that happened. And what happened is that they had a flyover. And that morning, I've been down at Point de Hoc, and there was a flyover at Clinton's speech, you know. But it wasn't on purpose. I don't know, it was probably some emergency, but a Marine helicopter on the left of Clinton, when he was giving his speech, decided to take off during his speech, and it did. And it went up, and guess, and all the generals I was sitting up there with said, "That man's going to be grounded." And I said, "Fat chance." But anyway, the president gave his speech, and it was kind of embarrassing. He thought, I guess. Anyway, when I'm giving my speech, I didn't know there was going to be a flyover either. So here comes, this is a real flyover, by the way, and here comes a bunch of people flying over, and airplanes. Then I stopped for a bit, and my speech went on, and here comes another flyover. I stopped again, but then when the third one came, I was pretty exasperated myself. I was about ready to say to the president, "It happens to the best of us." But, that's one time I decided to quench my comedian stuff. But anyway, that's what happened, and you know, that's the way life goes, I guess. But I have since I've been doing my speaking, I retired in 1980. And I've been talking to schools and colleges and grade schools and everything. And I'll tell you one incident happened. One of those grade schools, because these kids are smart. And this little girl, she said to me, "How many people did you kill, Mr. Ehlers?" I said, "Hey, this sounds better." I said, "I killed. I didn't kill people. I wasn't trained to kill people. I was trained to kill the enemy." And said, "The people that I killed were the enemy." And I said, "And I don't know how many enemy I killed, period." So that was it. That was the end of that. I never got questioned about it again. I went back and talked to the same school, and first time was the first and second graders. The next time was the second graders, who are now third graders, and the new second graders. And I'm talking, when I come there, all the kids from the third grade that were there, from the second grade that were there before, came up and gave me a big hug. So it was kind of exciting, you know, to talk to them. And I like talking to the 7th and 8th graders because they absorb a lot, and they keep it, and they remember it. And I get letters from the students all the time about every address that I give in grade schools, especially. The teachers have them write letters about the speech I gave, and I get some great letters. However, what they said I said was not so great. But
Okay, we've got time for probably, I think there was one more question. And if there's not, then I will just ask him to tell one brief story, and then we'd appreciate it. Walt was very close with his mother. And can you tell them the story about the photograph of your mother that you carried with you in combat?
oh, yeah, when I got hit in the back, the the bullet went in the side here, through the muscle, it hit my rib, went through the muscle, and then again through the muscle, had 2 holes, and it went out. It ricocheted the bullet, and the bullet hit a bar soap in the pack, and it went out through my trench shovel in the back of my pack. So when I got down and I was back to where they were loading my automatic rifleman onto the ambulance, I said, well, I had the medics look at my wound in my back. I told the company commander. He said, you were wounded in the back? I said, yeah. He turned me around and he said, well, that bullet hole that came through my trench shovel. He said, my God, you should be dead. The bullets came clear through you. I said, no, sir. And so anyway, it went through the picture of my mother. And it's been published. But anyway, it didn't hit her, but it went right through the edge of it. And she had this stern look on her face. And I showed it to the school kids, and I said, she said, how dare they? And I'm sure she did.
All right, well, thank you all. Thank you for being here, and thank you.